Welcome. My name is Dr. Tamika Ellington. I'm founder and CEO of the First Generation Revolutionaries Movement, where the purpose is to provide professional development, spiritual fulfillment, as well as networking opportunities for those individuals who are first generation. And so today, I usually come back on Fridays with a new topic, and today's topic is actually not one that is new. It's something that I talked about before, was imposter syndrome. And the reason why this topic is coming back up again today is because on yesterday, I had the opportunity to speak with a group of first generation graduate students at Kent State University. And as we talked, the topic of imposter syndrome kept coming back up. And it was something that everybody had spoken about, that they had experienced at one point of time in their life. I originally discussed imposter syndrome back in March, earlier this year, and I talked a little bit about the negative aspects, negative implications of imposter syndrome and what those actually mean. And so an example would be, one feeling as though they were not deserving of the accomplishments that they received, or one feeling as though they didn't belong in a certain space. But today I would like to talk a little bit about the positive aspects of imposter syndrome. And I'm sure you're trying to figure out what the heck could be positive about imposter syndrome, but there are some things about imposter syndrome that could be positive if we change the perspective of how we see it. Research shows that about 70% of all individuals have experienced some form of imposter syndrome. Now, when we take that number and we compare that with those individuals who are first generation, typically people who are first generation have experienced imposter syndrome about 2 to 3 times more than just the average person. And the reason why that is because they tend to have higher stakes, at risk when they're going to school. Individuals who are first generation are going to be accumulating debt when they go to school. They are the first people in their family to step outside of the norm and to be able to go to school. And a lot of times when they're going to school to better their lives. They're going to school to better the lives of their family, to change the lives of their family. I know when I went to school as the first person in my family to go to college, my goal was to be able to help my family get out of the generational curse of poverty that we dealt with for so many decades. Now let's take a deeper dive into imposter syndrome to really kind of look at what that concept really means. And so when we think about imposter syndrome, we think about fear. We think about the fear that we have in our life. A lot of times it's egotistical types of fear, and fear is a direct connection to our ego. Spiritual teacher Deepak Chopra says that the ego is our self-image that comes from labels that society has placed on us. So maybe labels to look a certain way, labels to make a certain amount of money, labels to maybe live in a certain place, or labels that even dictate who we should hang out with. And so our ego, a lot of times when we look at it from that perspective, is thought of as arrogance. But ego is so much more than just our level of arrogance. Everyone has an ego, no matter who you are, where you come from. Everyone has an ego. Everyone has a sense of self, no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, no matter if you're the most humble person in the world, you still do have to deal with your ego. You still have to deal with your self-image that you're putting onto yourself, your outward self really, because of whatever label society has placed on you. Forbes released an article that was entitled, "Why Imposter Syndrome Can Be a Good Thing." Imposter syndrome can be an indicator that we are pushing ourselves, or an indicator that we're not pushing ourselves enough. And so imposter syndrome can have us in the back of our mind really think through what we're doing in our lives. Are we meeting our goals? Are we just staying stagnant? And I hate mediocrity, or are we just being mediocre? Are we really trying to push for excellence? So imposter syndrome gives us a way to really think and evaluate ourselves. Imposter syndrome can help to keep our ego in check. The ego that is our arrogant, self-centered ego. When we think about our ego and we think about imposter syndrome, that juxtaposition can really help us evaluate why are we doing certain things in our life. Are we doing it to improve our family? Are we doing it to make the lives of other people better around us, whoever that might be? Or are we doing it for self-serving purposes? If we're doing it for a self-serving purpose, then we oftentimes are vulnerable to feeling as if we are not in a place where we belong. We're in a situation where we are vulnerable to feeling as if we don't deserve the accomplishments that we receive. But when we think about our accomplishments and when we think about those things that we've been able to attain in our lives, we want to look at how are those things affecting others, not just us. How are they affecting the other people around us? Are we able to give back to other people around us to make others' lives better? That's really what we're meant to do. That's really what we are put on this earth to do, is to help make other people's lives better. Imposter syndrome can help us push to see ourselves from our true selves, or see ourselves outside of the labels, to see ourselves beyond what society says about us. So in that way, imposter syndrome can be a good thing. It can help us improve who we are as human beings. It can help us become better servants for other people around us. So my question to you is, how are you using imposter syndrome? Are you using it in a negative way, or are you going to use it in a positive way? Are you going to allow for it to keep you feeling as though you don't deserve the things that you received in your life? Are you going to keep it, in your life as something that's going to keep knocking down your self-confidence? Or are you going to use imposter syndrome as a way to evaluate yourself and evaluate if the goals that you're actually accomplishing in this world, the goals that you're setting out to accomplish in the future, are those goals self-serving, or are those goals for the improvement of our society and community as a whole? And so I would like to thank you for joining me today. The goal with this particular video about imposter syndrome, the second video that I've done about imposter syndrome, was really to get you to start thinking in a different way that imposter syndrome can be a part of your life. Not just the negative aspects, feeling as though you don't belong or that you're not deserving, but imposter syndrome can be something that can be a positive aspect of your life. It's just a way to flip that aspect, a way of flipping at that thinking, so that you can use that fear of the ego, which is where imposter syndrome comes from, so that you can use that fear as a way to motivate you to do better and to be better. I wish you all the blessings. Thank you so much again for joining me today.